So good evening to all of you, and good evening to Professor Lancy Lobo, to whom I known since 2000 maybe 12 or 13, right? So at that time he was the director of Center for Culture and Development in Vadodara. So I am thankful to Professor Lobo for accepting this informal invitation, and I know uh, he is a scholar actually. So he is not a person who bothers about the position, but he always bother about the academics and the development of academics. So let's start the event today. Today, the speaker, Professor Lobo, he will speak on democracy, electoral versus substantive, and this is something that is there, in various syllabus of different universities, and subsequently, on the YouTube when I will upload it, then many viewers will find it useful. So Professor Lobo is a doctorate from in sociology uh, from Delhi School of Economics, University of Delhi. He is right now the scholar, research scholar in Indian Social Institute, New Delhi. He was earlier the director in the Center for Culture and Development, Vadodara, Gujarat, and he had also served as the director in the Center for Social Studies, Surat, under ICSSR, Indian Council of Social Science Research, New Delhi. He has conducted extensive studies on Dalits, tribals, OBCs, minorities in rural and urban Gujarat, and his work can be the reference point if any other researcher will work on this theme in different states of India. So he has done research on Gujarat, and one can do in some other states. And he was an international fellow at the Woodstock Center, Georgetown University, Washington, D.C. during 1999 to 2000. He has undertaken around 30 research studies on mainstream society and a few on the church. 24 books, both edited and non-edited, are there in his credit. 3 books of him are under preparation right now. He has written more than 60 articles on Dalits, health, religion, tribals, Dalits, culture, communalism, and riots. So he is a person who has done research on varieties of on social concept, and since he belongs to sociology and his research work is very much close to anthropology, one can say that he is a scholar in true sense. And this scholar today he will deliberate on democracy, electoral and substantive, and in his talk he will deal with how mature is the Indian democracy. And this talk will definitely identify features of procedural democracy and substantive democracy in India. It will focus more on procedural democracy uh, through election studies, and this talk will highlight the link between the civic literacy and political participation in election. In a book titled How People Vote, there is an empirical research. That empirical research constitute both survey method and ethnographic method to study the local assembly and parliamentary election in rural and urban sites in the Vadodara, Gujarat. And this talk through its deliberation will introduce this book to the students. Now with this little introduction to this topic, now I welcome to Professor Lancy Lobo to start his deliberation. And as he has said me that earlier that he will speak for 40 to 45 minutes, and subsequently we can start discussion and question answer session. Now, sir, you are welcome. You can start your session, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Himanshu, and A very good evening to all of you, the participants. I'm sorry that the students could not be present. But however, this is an interesting topic, and I have been very happy to be present here for this talk. When you came to Center for Culture and Development a couple of times, you presented very bright papers, and I count you as one of the very young, bright scholars, and that's why and the kind of this platform, particularly for students outside the classroom, I think is a very useful tool to engage in deliberations. As you said rightly, the topic is mature democracy, how people vote. There are two sections in my talk. I would rather present the first part and then maybe have a little discussion if necessary, and then we can go for the second part, how people vote. That is the empirical work that we have done, so that it is not boring. I talk for about. I'm not a teacher, by the way. I have done very little teaching, so I'm not as good as some of you teachers. But hence, I would limit myself to the text. So the outline of the talk has got about 7 points. That is democracy and its traits. Then number 2, how do we measure democracy? 3, democracy, procedural or electoral and substantive. Number 4, electoral democracy, elections, and it is done by money, media, muscle, machine. But there is also another determinant or a variable, we may say, that is civic literacy and political participation. That is the point of our book, How People Vote. Then we'll talk about a little bit of methodology of the study and finally end up with some questions for discussion, because I don't have all the answers, and I would have been very happy to listen to young students and scholars regarding this. Now, first of all, I am not a political scientist. I must make it very clear. I'm a social anthropologist, have worked in a multidisciplinary Center for Social Studies, where we had very good scholars like Ghanshyam Shah, Pradeep Bose, Paramjit Singh Judge, Surendra Singh Jodhka, Vishru Das, Gopal Guru, Sajal Nag, and so on. And after 15 years, you really wonder whether you have retained your discipline or you have become, you have lost your discipline too, So that is my situation. But however, I would say my interest in politics is, can we people, even ordinary people or student of politics, ignore politics? It is often heard that people express with pride, I'm not interested in politics. They might as well say that I'm not interested in my standard of living, my health, my job, my rights, my freedom, my future, or for that matter, any future. If we intend to keep control over the affairs of our world and our lives, we must surely be interested in politics. So this is my basic interest in politics. And most of you, I believe, are students of political science, and I also wish to benefit from listening to you. Now, how mature is Indian democracy? This is a question that all of us ask. We say ours is the largest democracy, but the question we must ask is how mature it is. Now, how do we come to a judgment on this? Well, speaking of democracy in US, Emerson compared it to an unsophisticated raft which is put out in the angry seas. This raft, he said, will never sink, but your feet will always be in the water. I think he has captured it very well about the character and nature of democracy. It is a raft. It will never sink, but your feet will always be in the water. And this is what we have been experiencing in this country over the 70 years. So democracy is a very messy business. Unpredictable, occasionally tragic, often frustrating, and sometimes simply ludicrous. Will Durant described democracy as the best of all forms of government because it requires the widest spread of intelligence. And this intelligence, we are talking about civic literacy. When the civic literacy is high, possibly there will be better political participation. To what extent a citizen has moved away from primordial realities, identities like caste, sect, tribe, kinship, nation to modern citizenship. I think this is again another parameter to gauge the maturity of our Indian democracy. Have we moved away from these primordial realities? Now, broadly speaking, democracy should include traits such as the formation of government based on majority rule through free and fair elections, the consent of the governed common, protection and respect for basic human rights, establishment of equality before the law, and more importantly, political pluralism. Autocracy, authoritarianism are opposite of democracy. So then we can speak about mature democracy, deepening of maturity, or also hijacking of democracy. Now coming to Freedom House, an NGO from Washington, since 1972 has been doing rating of democracies, covering almost 91 countries. Free, partly free, not free. So democracy index of the Economic Intelligence Unit since 2006 considers 5 categories. That is electoral process and pluralism, functioning of government, political participation, political culture, and civil liberties. Based on these 4 types of democratic regime, 4 types of democratic regimes emerge. The first is full democracies, which have 8 to 10 points. Flawed democracies, that is 6 to 9 or 7. Hybrid democracies, and finally authoritarian democracies. Now, Indian democracy has been placed in the flawed democracy. I think this has been taken from Saumijit Chakravarti and Kamana Kharga in Democracy in India, in Primus publications edited by Lancy Lobo and Jayesh Shah. Now, coming to procedural and substantive democracy, we had a seminar in Center for Culture and Development, Baroda, and we had invited Professor Suhas Palsikar. He spoke on substantive democracy, and Professor Sanjay Kumar spoke on electoral or procedural democracy. So I have picked up something from there, and we can say there are types of democracies, but we can, for our talk, we can limit ourselves to 2 main types of indices regarding democracy, namely procedural democracy and substantive democracy. Now, electoral democracy views democracy in terms of the presence of the institutions of democracy, such as the political parties, the coalition of political parties, other associations of the organizations attached to the political parties. B, the periodic elections and political leadership. The latter does not consider the institutional or procedural or electoral democracy as comprehensive indicator of democracy. Now, the procedural democracy is minimalist, which is also marked by a large number of factors which are substantive to democracy. The procedural democracy is not so much concerned with what happens beyond the elections in social space, whereas substantive democracy views the phenomenon of democracy in the light of its redistributive justice, human capabilities, and entitlements, such as education, health, and infrastructure. Civil society. Why does the democratization of organizations of society and polity, like internal democracy in political parties, sports bodies like Board of Control for Cricket in India, religious places management, as well as issues of governance and human dignities? The debate on the democracy in India has been on the transition, consolidation, and deepening of democracy. The critique of procedural democracy is provided by scholars who study substantive democracy. In their opinion, getting over-focused on and immersed in the procedural democracy limits democracy's normative concerns. Free and fair elections, universal adult franchise, political parties, electoral alliances, pressure groups are not the only conditions for a good and robust and availability of election commission as a constitutionally sanctioned. In the past 2 decades, substantive democracy has also found a significant place in the discourse of democracy. The assessment of a substantive democracy is sought to be made in relation to the role of the state on the issues of rights, social justice, justice system, secularism, welfarism, and development in India, and also the role of the state regarding these issues in the context of globalization. The civil society is also an essential ingredient of the substantive democracy. In India, there are two viewpoints on civil democracy, civil society. One, it considers all associations and collective actions as civil society, and two, only those associations which take up the issues of universal significance are considered significant. Now, recent assembly elections in Uttar Pradesh raised serious issues of substantive democracy. How is it that despite failure in a number of indicators of substantive democracy, such as the rising unemployment, failure in handling COVID, whereby scores of dead bodies were floating in Ganga or buried in its banks, rising prices, rising crime rate, hate crimes, farmer issues, the BJP pulled out a successful campaign in the elections and came to power. So also BJP recaptured electoral power in 3 other states of Goa, Manipur, and Uttarakhand. Now, has India's democracy been reduced to mere procedural democracy or merely electoral democracy? That is the question I think we must focus on and discuss today. I have been reading recently published 3 books. The first book is The Price of Modi Years by Akar Patel. Second book is Modi's India by Christoph Jaffrelot. And the third book is Battle of Belonging by Shashi Tharoor. Now, the indices of substantive democracy by Akar Patel he has identified something like, he has identified about 20 agencies which have prepared indices on a number of items like the Economic Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index. You have United Nations Development Program Human Development Index. Then you have National Civic Space Ratings, Pew Religious Restrictions. You have Lowy Institute of Asia Power Index, Brand Finance Global Soft Power Index, World Competitive Ranking, Freedom House Freedom Index, or Freedom in the World. So it goes on for about 20 different agencies, which I don't have to narrate. But what surprises is that many indices there is a fall and there is also a rise. So that goes to prove that the performance in substantive democracy has been weak in the country. Now, the questions that arise in our minds are the following. Is India's democracy reduced to a mere electoral or procedural democracy? Elections have become celebrations akin to festivities. The political parties have been using caste, tribe, religion, sect, kinship, and other identities to attract votes. Do issues of environmental issues, displacement issues, migration issues, poverty issues matter in attracting votes? Finally, the political parties have been using money, muscle, machine, and media apart from political icons to attract votes. While these are well known, what we need to inquire is to what extent political participation can be enhanced with civic literacy to make both electoral and substantive democracy stronger and deep or mature. Now, Dr. Himanshu, I don't know whether I should take a break here and have a little discussion if necessary and then proceed, or should I complete my presentation?
I think, sir, you complete your presentation, then we will start discussion. We are all writing our questions,
Okay.
listening to you, so that it will be very good discussion and session.
Sure. Now, coming to election studies, since we're dealing with the procedural or electoral uh, democracy, election studies have been defined as a scholarly work focusing on the major phases of electoral process. That is, electoral alliances, the nomination process, campaigning, campaign language, political rhetoric, voter mobilization, actual vote, run up to the polling day, announcement of results, and subsequent government formation. Now, I just don't want to, you all are political science students, so I don't want to review what kind of election studies have been undertaken so far. But there have been case studies done of mohallas and, bastis and constituency, district, or the state. Uh, like Rajni Kotari has done of Modasa constituency, and Bailey has done of study of Bisipara in Orissa, and so on. Now, there have been also studies, ethnographic studies on elections. Mukilika Banerjee has been in the forefront, and of course, there have been older anthropologists who have done. Then you have also you have anthropological studies of elections have also clearly show how elections precipitate or at least highlight otherwise latent political dynamics. The long fieldwork characteristic of the discipline, anthropologists, we know that they do ethnography, but ethnography is not just, they have to establish rapport and stay for over a year in the field, get to know people, get to know the vertical dimensions of caste, the horizontal dimensions of caste, the inter-caste relations, and so the dynamics of the rural villages. So I think demonstrate that how elections render visible otherwise subtle, if not invisible, relationship of influence. This is what the ethnography does, anthropologists who study these communities. Now, survey research has been the most popular, particularly because of psephology, and psephology is a survey research, we call it. It's a technique of data gathering in which a sample of respondents is asked questions about their political preferences and beliefs to draw conclusions about political opinions, attitudes, and behavior of a wider population of citizens, according to Yogendra Yadav. And over the years, CSDS has done much work, and Lokniti being a case in point. The link between the two pioneering institutions of psephology, CSDS and NDTV, also have been was provided by Yogendra Yadav, who was brought to the CSDS by Rajni Kotari, and I think he has been in the forefront of this. Now, coming to other approaches to elections, the act of voting is considered by different strata. You have how the upper class elite respond, how the middle class respond, how the lowest strata respond during elections. Then one wishes that all that anthropological studies of future elections deal not only with the traditional elements of voting, nomination process, campaigning, voter identity, the inking of finger. These are small details which the anthropologist focuses on the entire behavior from beginning till the end of voting. What kind of a behavior people engage in the smallest details. So now what we did, coming to the study that we did, Dr. Jayesh Shah and myself, how people vote, civic literacy and political participation, published by Rawat Publications, um, it focuses more on procedural democracy, election studies. It highlights the link between civic literacy and political participation in elections. How People Vote is the title of the book that shows how it took an empirical approach, survey, as well as an ethnographic approach to study the local, assembly, and parliamentary elections in the same rural and urban site in Vadodara district. We took up this same two villages, multi-caste and multi-tribal villages, uh, the medium town like Daboy, and two wards of Old Baroda and New Baroda city. We took it for local elections, district elections, assembly elections, and parliamentary elections. And we said what kind of behavior was there, and what variations were there, what was going on in their minds at different, what was their response, what was, these were the things that we were keeping in mind when we began this study. Now, does civic literacy enhance citizens' participation in political activities? This is the question that we are asking. The success of democracy is usually measured in terms of the extent of citizen participation in both political and non-political processes. In addition, it can be argued that the success of democracy could be evaluated not only in terms of nominal participation of citizens, but also in terms of informed knowledge and involved participation. According to Habermas, participation has double orientations, influencing the existing political system and revitalizing and enlarging the domain of civil society and public sphere. Political participation is a central element of the democratic system through which citizens express their political preferences, which have an impact on governmental decision making. Yeah. Political participation here not only indicates the electoral but also covers the non conventional ways of political engagement. Non-conventional political participation includes voluntary and involuntary engagements in partisan activities such as rallies, protests, demonstrations, meetings, donation of money to candidates or political causes, written or verbal communication with political leaders, and obtaining their attention. Now, in order to meet these qualities and beyond, the political orientation of an individual can be tapped systematically by the following questions raised by Almond and Verba. What knowledge does he have of his nation and of his political system in general terms, in its size, location, power, constitution, etc.? Two, what are her feelings towards these systematic and considered opinions and judgments of them? Three, what knowledge does she have of the structure and roles? Four, what are his feelings and opinions about the leaders and policy proposals? Five, what knowledge does she have of the downward flow of policy enforcement, individuals, and decisions involved in these processes? How does she perceive herself as a member of his or her rights, powers, obligations, and strategies of access to influence? What norms of participation or performance does she acknowledge and employ in formulating political judgments or arriving at opinions? So, the higher the civic literacy among citizens, the more they engage in voluntary communication, associational activities, and voting. Now, as you know that when the elections approach, the mood is of celebrations. I do not have to elaborate on this. And they engage people, to the hilt. And more, newer methods of mobilizing masses, voters, citizens have come into play, and they become more intense. Uh, Indian voters treat voting as their sacred duty in the service of a democracy. Election Commission of India has run campaign to increase voting percentage by using the catchy metaphor, "Pehle matdan, fir kanyadan." Dan is a word which is religiously important in our country. Not only kanyadan, matdan, I think it has got a very important connotation. Like festivals, there is no dearth of elections. Then you have, but beyond this festive element, elections also carry important significance as democratic expression of people's expectations from the elected representatives and popular assessments of governments and rulers. During the 90s, a period came when state governments found it increasingly difficult to get re-elected. That assertion by the citizens underscored the relevance of elections beyond visibility, sound, and festivity, often associated by them with foreign observers. Now, coming to our study, how people vote. What are the questions that we addressed in our study? It is an empirical study. We used a questionnaire, semi-structured questionnaire, as well as some ethnographic fieldwork. The questions were, what is the level of civil literacy and political participation of the citizens in urban, semi-urban, and rural Vadodara? What are the relevant variables and indicators that influence the civic literacy and political participation of citizens? How are the civic literacy and political participation correlated? Are primordial ties still influencing the pattern of voting behavior of an individual voter? To what extent Indian democracy has matured as far as electoral behavior is concerned? The assumption being that citizens' quality of life is significantly related to a higher civil literacy and political participation that are directly affecting citizens' day-to-day life. Thus, in this study, we examine the specific impact of civic literacy and political participation. Now, thus, the fundamental condition for widespread participation is broad diffusion of basic education and literacy, and with the political knowledge of the system of government procedure, its procedures, rules, issues, parties, and leaders. So, given these assumptions, one hypothesis can be arrived at: the higher the level of literacy, the more the citizens take part in politics, while those with low literacy have a citizenry politically alienated from the political and democratic ideals. This study has attempted to explore positive cause and effect correlation between political participation and civic literacy. As I said, we have measurement of civic literacy and the political participation solely based on elections is a complicated job. However, we have ascertained indicators to judge the civil literacy level on the urban and the rural people, such as: 1, meaning of democracy and nationhood citizenship; 2, accountability of governance; 3, name of ministerial or parliamentary officials, neighboring zones, number of electoral constituencies; 4, performances of local bodies; and 5, leadership and media access of people. Demographic and socioeconomic variables such as age, race, gender, caste, marital status, income, education, and class were useful to identify specific characteristics of those participating and not participating in various civic political activities. The study was done, as I said, in three parts: local elections, assembly elections, and the parliamentary elections in the same sites, over a period of time. It's a kind of a longitudinal study. Um, what we did was, first of all, we went to the booth-wise analysis of the voters. We ourselves, since we are familiar with the caste names, surnames, and religion, so we analyzed, classified the voters, booth-level voters, into caste and religion, and and then, of course, we collected a booth-wise. This is also what the political parties do. Like BJP he has got a thorough booth-level, caste-wise, religion-wise classification of voters. We found out when we visited their offices, which Congress does not have. Yeah. Booth-wise voters polled by each candidate who contested the election. So we got the data from the election branch working under the district collector of Baroda district. Field visits to further substantiate and interpret the statistical findings. Yeah. So, civic literacy and political participation study of 2012 Gujarat Assembly election, 2014 parliamentary election, and 2015-16 local elections in Gujarat has been conducted in the urban, semi-urban, rural, as I said earlier. Now, I would not like to, at this level, share the findings, but the plan of the book has been, the first chapter would be as the introductory chapter, and then second chapter would be taking the key campaigning strategies across study areas. Chapter 3 deals with the administration of polling process, history of polling process, code of conduct, observers and training of different categories of polling staff. In fact, we had held a colloquium. We invited the booth level officers who were conducting this, and we wanted to get a feedback from them as to what are their perceptions and their opinions about the facilities provided to them and how things were going and all that. Also, we had done that. And chapter 4 discusses booth level religion, social and economic class voting patterns in these elections. And chapter 5 deals with empirical data with quantitative analysis and explores the civic literacy and political participation. So in the end, we have to see democracy, I would say, still kind of a feeling we get is democracy is work in progress with a large canvas. We have achieved much. We always have the options if we have the challenges. The options we choose frame the character of democracy. The challenge of choosing between majoritarian and pluralist modes of politics will define the quality and tenacity of India's democracy in the near future. Now, I would like to conclude this by, these are the questions. I don't have all the answers, but ourselves, we generate new questions. So for procedural democracy, I have these following questions for your responses rather than mine. Number one, does the increase of women's participation and reducing gender gap in voter turnout have any relationship with the other variables such as literacy, gender consciousness, women empowerment? Two, what are the changes taking place in electoral violence in the last 2 decades? 3, how can we modify our research methodology to capture the changing dimensions of electoral violence? What are the loopholes of procedural democracy and what are the reforms in the legal framework needed to take care of them? Next, what are the shortcomings of inclusion of religious dimension in representative democracy? Finally, what is the relation between procedural democracy and well-being and equality? These are as far as procedural democracy is, or electoral democracy is concerned. Now I have a few more questions regarding substantive democracy. One, what are the achievements and failures in deepening substantive democracy in India? Two, how we can see past and present regimes in terms of inclusion of substantive democracy. Three, how is the country at crossroads of choosing between majoritarian and plurality in democracy? Five, what are the risks of substantive democracy? What are the models of finally, what are the models of substantive democracy engaged by present government? Coming to election and voting behavior, these are my following questions for your consideration. One, what are the methodological issues while researching ethnography of voting behavior in India? Two, how will we see the procedural democracy when parties equipped with booth level skills in managing to win elections? Has our democracy led to the individual voting as an individual or a person having multiple identities like religion, caste, family, kin? Four, can democracy be deepened if people get engaged in election process on a larger scale? Five, does money and muscle power, derogatory campaign speeches, etc., retrograde the very nature of procedural democracy, free and fair election? Is development discourse democratic? And finally, can procedural democracy alone deliver development? Thank you very much, and I stop at this.
Thank you, Professor Lobo. I mean, the last part of your talk, that was actually brilliant. You know, in academics, we always say that, you know, understanding a problem perfectly is the half solution. If you ask the right question and you think through these questions, then maybe you can understand it, and you may you know, think appropriately. That would be a solution. So thank you for all these you know, questions. I mean, that is the, you know, quality of a scholar. So a scholar raises many important questions, and there is no final answer to these questions. One has to do research. I think Professor Lobo has done research mostly, you know, Vadodara, Gujarat, and he found you know, some realities. What you know, he said you know, in his work, and the similar research if one will do in Odisha, then the result may not be same. You know, something may continue and something, you know, that may be, you know, different. So I think you know, I know that Professor Lobo has been attached with a research institute, and he has more. He's an, you know, social anthropologist. I understand, but when you are doing research work on the field, then also you are developing a perspective. So in academics, we develop perspective by using our intuition to different theories and different works of research scholars like, you know, Professor Lobo, and we develop a, you know, kind of perspective that is mostly based on, you know, rationalism. And Professor Lobo, you know, I understand that he is also having a perspective that is based on empiricism. So that is something very important for a research scholar. And research means not, delivering the gospel truth. Research means, understanding and writing. And if you see the writing of Professor Lobo, then you will find what a fantastic academician he is. So one can go, one can go through his CV, then one can understand what a serious scholar he is. As I said that, he's also having a kind of perspective, dealing with the politics at the, grassroots level. There are, certain questions that is in my mind. So when he's saying that civic literacy and political participation, that is actually very important aspect of procedural democracy, and it has linked with the substantial democracy is, I mean, the what kind or what is the quality of Indian citizenship? Are they, they are like mass who make noise, behave, who make collide and intersect, or they are citizens who are citizens? The citizens are those who deliberate, act, engage, share, and articulate. Now, to what extent we can say that in Indian citizens are actually citizens, or they are the masses? So a citizen is one who participate with community. I mean, either you participate with community, or you can also participate without community also, right? So when you participate with community, then it leads to kind of individualism, and when you participate with community, then it leads to a kind of socialism, right? So I mean, if how Professor Lobo see Indian democracy, is it the participation of citizens with community or without community? Right. That's the first question or first doubt I do have in my mind. And the second questions what I'm thinking, that this electoral democracy or procedural democracy and the substantive democracy, they are not mutually exclusive to each other. There is also interrelation between them. Now, the question is that where electoral democracy meets substantive democracy, and where substantive democracy meets electoral democracy. That's the second question I do have. Now, the third question I have, that in a neoliberal time, on one hand, this market capitalism is there, and on the other hand, there is the problem of corrupt bureaucratic system. Now, in such a juncture, I think how to strengthen Indian democracy, how to strengthen. I mean, people like Professor Yadav, Yogendra Yadav, he is also saying that social justice is the victim of its own success, and there is a end of social justice. Now, without social justice, you cannot think about substantive democracy. And then how to mature our, that's the fourth question, how to mature our civic literacy and political participation. Those who are participating in politics, how mature their civic sense is, and what is their quality. Can a gentleman enter into the politics and do politics? That's the question. Fifth question is that how to recover democracy from these populist politics today. So how you see populist politics? Populist politics, in a there is a positive and sense of populist politics, and there is a negative implication of populist politics. Now, these are some of the my doubts or observation or comments on your talk. Now, I want you to respond to all these points. Being the scholar, being a person who has worked at the ground, right? From that perspective, I need your engagement to all these questions. Then I will move to the questions asked by my students.
Thank you, Dr. Himanshu. I think you have raised five questions. I may not have all the answers, but maybe some comments I can make, because you yourself are a political scientist, and you are with the political scientists, which I don't claim to be. Yeah, citizen and community. Your first point, you said, um, it is true that we have multiple identities in this country, uh, from caste, religion, sect, you know, tribe or whatever, and language, region, and so on. But one way of seeing where the Indian democracy has matured is to see, have all these identities, are subservient to the identity of being a citizen. To what extent have we put the citizenship first, the modern citizenship does away these primordial identities. But we know in our country it has been a long struggle. I think we have, there has been progress, there has been changes, there has been awareness. Yeah, but what I have a feeling is that the civic literacy in our schools has taken a back seat. We had, when I was in the school, we had something called civics, and I think this has taken a back seat. Um, what I hear is in the education system in Japan, the first 2 years of schooling are basically to teach the students uh, etiquette, civics, and so I think right at the beginning itself, these the civic sense has been, civic sense does not is not confined only to etiquette. What I'm talking about is the as I mentioned, the number of variables, what consists civic literacy and participation. So I think bringing back some civic uh, component in our schools would be a good idea. Secondly, you said electoral and substantive democracies are not mutually exclusive. It is true. But for our analytical purposes, I think we make this distinction. But what I was wanting to attract your attention is that the substantive democracy has taken a back seat, and we are all the time engaged one election after another in this country, and electoral democracy is the one that is foremost in our minds. It's not, and I think the third question again, you're talking about liberalism. In the context of liberalism, how to strengthen
No,
social justice.
neoliberalism.
Neoliberal, yeah, neoliberalism. I'm sorry. It is true that more and more, countries are turning towards the right, and the corporate sector is taking over, and the state has become subservient to the market, and market has become dominant, and the state and market together are putting the civil society, subduing it and suppressing it. So I think this is the kind of a situation that we see in this country and in a number of other countries too. It is not that it may be a worldwide phenomenon. So that's what I think we'll have to situate this in. Then how mature is our democracy? I think we have over the 70 years, with all these ups and downs, I think the democracy has matured, and people can be misled for a while. As they say, you can fool people some of the time. You cannot fool all the people all the time. So I think there has been a change, but I think there has been slow. And finally, how to recover democracy for populist politics? Well, uh, the media, itself has, instead of attacking the ruling regime, it is attacking the opposition. In a situation like this, the voices of dissent are not heard. So we how to recover democracy from populist politics in a situation like this? Thank you.
So thank you. I mean, the asking questions are very easy, but then explaining this question is really very difficult. Answers are not easily available, and things are also changing. Now let's come to some of the questions asked by the students, and I hope that if these questions are not mature enough, I hope the speaker will convert all these questions to its maturity, and then he will handle all these questions. So when the students ask question, we generally, as a teacher, what we do, we try to put the question in its appropriate place and then try to address it. So I think, sir, you can see some of the question in the chat box, or shall I read it for you?
Yeah, please.
Okay, the
Yeah.
question is asked by Subhasri is that what is actual vote and
Yeah.
what is the main difference between actual vote and real vote in India?
Where are these? Oh, it's a different. One second. Yeah. On the questions.
Now, may I ask Subhasri to directly, make a kind of clarification what she mean by actual vote and real vote?
Yes.
Then I think Professor Lobo will answer it. So
If I
whenever you are asking any question, you should always take the responsibility. What do you mean by that? Subhasri, I can see your face. You can let us know what do you mean by actual vote and real vote. Then Professor Lobo will handle the question.
Sir, I do not think that what is real food and what is actual food, but I want to know these terms.
Yeah, I think all these terms are available from where you read it. Actual vote and real vote. I mean, he's asking Professor Lobo. He's asking, from the Rousseau, understanding of general will and will of all.
yeah.
Is the individuals are having two kinds of will. One is the actual will, another is the real will. And real will actually the selfless will or self will.
Yes.
And the actual will is all about selfish will. Now
Yeah.
maybe Subhasri is asking from that perspective that the kind of will the Indian citizens are having,
Yeah.
it their real will or actual will. I mean, as long as if it is their real will, then democracy will be depend, or democracy can be strengthened. But
Yeah.
if it is all about their actual will, I mean selfish will, then
Yeah.
in such a juncture, I mean how to develop democracy either electorally or substantively, there is a deep problem.
Yeah.
Maybe she is asking question from that angle. You please.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, you have explained the nuances. Um, as a social anthropologist, I think actual or real, we need to be with people and see, watch their behavior, see their perceptions, rather than our research methods like questionnaires and interviews, they don't capture. Like for instance, the eve of the voting day is known as the Katal ki Raat.
uh,
Now, so they may have attended almost all kinds of rallies, campaigns, posters, taken money from this side, money from that side, but they apparently decide on the eve or evening of the following day's voting. Katal ki raat. That is the day they finish. They make their decision. This is what we have learned when we did our field work. Now, whether this is actual vote or real vote, I would not know. Yeah.
I think the same person, I mean, Subhasri is asking another, I think it's an important question.
Yeah.
He's asking that to what extent the substantive democracy in India, that has achieved its goal, or if not, then how the substantive democracy can be strengthened. I mean, substantive democracy is the must for the electoral democracy to be matured. If the substantive democracy will be weak, I think electoral democracy has to be polluted. You cannot refine electoral democracy in a country where its substantive democracy is very poor.
Yes.
So, how you will handle it?
Yeah. In other words, we have a situation in our country. We have to see the implementation of human rights, social justice, and what the number of indices there are, which I mentioned from Akar Patel's book. Uh, then how are these indices behaving? These are indices basically talking about the nature and character of substantive democracy, which is fallen. So regime wise, we can think of these concrete indicators, and quite often these indicators are downplayed or poo-pooed or ridiculed by the regime, saying that is the methodology is wrong or is done by foreign agents. So I think the indices are an indicator of the substantive democracy, which I think uh, of social justice, of human rights, and you know, betterment of hunger index, and so on. So that I think each individual student may see around. Do the youth get employment in the country?
Sir, in the previous talk,
Yeah,
Professor Ashok Acharya from Delhi University,
yeah,
while he was delivering a talk on global justice and global south, he
yeah,
made a very interesting point that the gap between the rich and poor at the
yeah,
global level
yeah,
is very huge, and only the some, I mean, very little portion of economy that is spent on on social justice policies,
yeah,
and social justice policies are closely linked with the substantive democracy. Now, if you see the social justice policies of any government, or any nation state, then you will find that it is just a kind of, it's not real. It's just a kind of decorative part, that
yeah,
yes, we are democratic, we are social, but this democratic and social has become a decorative part to the liberal economy.
yeah,
Right. In such a situation, actually, I cannot see the future of Indian democracy when the little portion of economy is only decorated, as if the country is concerned about the social justice. So how you will respond to this?
See, I cannot respond in any other way except knowing what is happening around us. You have billionaires from this country leaving the country to live abroad, week after week, and at the same time, you have hunger index on the rise. You see, so I think what is happening in this country in terms of the state and the collusion between state and the market, and so I think that we need to assess. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. I mean,
Sir,
again,
sir, I have a question. Can I ask?
okay, Sudham, you have to unmute your video. We want to see your face.
Actually, sir, I'm now in evening walk.
This,
No, like,
okay, okay, you continue your question.
okay,
They,
sir.
they hesitate to show their face.
Good evening, sir. Sir, namaste, sir. Hello, am I audible?
You are audible, sir. Lobo, sir, I mean,
Yes.
he is
Yes.
saying that good morning, good
Yes.
evening to you.
Good evening,
Yeah.
sir. Namaste, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
Sudham, you can
this is
continue your question.
my question. This is a doubt which is in my mind. When we're talking about Indian democracy, I agree with the concept like procedural democracy, but the concept like substantive democracy, I'm not agree with so much with this concept of democracy, because while I reading the concept like tyranny of the majority by J.S. Mill, and also which was reiterated by Alex de Tocqueville in his book Democracy of America. And when I also read the concept like tacit concept of Locke, I think somehow both these concepts like tyranny of the majority and tacit consent both are applicable in our Indian democracy. So, sir, what the Indian democracy should do to convert the tacit consent into expressive consent? What is your stand on this concept, sir? This is not actually a question. I have a doubt on this concept, sir.
Yeah, I think this is a question better answered by Dr. Himanshu. It is typically a political science student's question.
You know, when a social anthropologist, speak about democracy, then he means something else. And yes, Professor Lobo, you are right. I think the kind of question Sudham is asking, I can better handle, and I will handle it when he's going to. Very soon he's coming to me. He will meet me, and I will address his question. I mean, some of the questions you can address through the knowledge of political
Sure.
science, and some of the questions that should be addressed by doing research, and what Professor Lobo has been doing. Uh, Sir, then let's take the last question asked by the Lingaraj. and
Yes.
he is asking that which form of government is best form of government. I mean, he is asking you. I can also answer this, but as a scholar, I mean, since you have done research on the field,
Yeah.
from your experience, I think we need a answer, and that is something attractive, uh, of this talk, that he is asking that which form of government is best form of government between democracy form of government or the communitarian form of government.
I think in the initial stages I stated that democracy is the best form of government. But of course, you have 91 countries with 91 shades of democracies.
No, sir, he is asking something different actually. I also hinted that
Yes,
either individual,
or community.
exactly. I mean, whether when the citizen is participating, he is participating as a member of community, or he is participating without becoming communal. When you are participating individually, then you are establishing a liberal democracy, and when
Correct.
you are participating with community, then you are producing socialism or social democracy. Now, in this critical juncture, that in which way individuals should participate, I mean, how to strengthen Indian democracy, I mean, this individualistic way, is it appropriate way to deepen Indian democracy?
I think the Constitution of India had this individualistic.
That is, I mean,
Yes,
what's your position, since you have worked?
I would say that I am for it, because all this belonging to a particular community has created all the turmoil in this country. So we put the individual first and then the communities and other identities later. First and foremost, you are a citizen of this country, and of course we have the constitution supports it. So and then if we put the community first, then the other communities become second class citizens.
Yeah.
So inclusiveness, constitutions, I think our biggest measure is the Constitution of India, and the constitutional morality, constitutional ethics, constitutional parameters. I think they are very very. We have failed, but I think we have to revert back to them, and otherwise we will be excluding people, and we will be eliminating people. So that I think is a dangerous situation. In that sense, I think the individual form of nature of citizenship is desirable.
Okay, thank you, sir. I think before we go to the vote of thanks, another eminent person from Odisha University system, and he is a very popular teacher in Odisha. He has retired from the Berhampur University.
Yeah.
Professor Vishnu Chaudhary is connected with us, and I think if he wants to say something on Indian democracy, electoral and procedural, he can say. Vishnu sir, are you there? Yes, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible. Yes,
Yes.
please.
Audible? I listened only a portion of what our resource person has said, but this is a topic very dear to my heart, and I have also studied for the last more than 4 decades how elections are conducted, how people are responding to different elections. Whenever we talk about electoral politics, we say that we have parliamentary democracy first. Second, we have representative form of government. And we say that finally, in the ultimate analysis, it is electoral democracy. And it was considered to be the best and the most suitable form of government because of many factors. It will take time to all the factors. But we say that it was a familiar system. It is a responsible, it is a responsible form of government. It has elasticity. And finally, it is accountable.
Vishnu sir, I request you to come close to your mobile so that your voice will be more audible. We are finding difficulty.
My voice is not clear.
Yes,
Hemant,
yes. Right now it's clear. Right now it's clear. You can continue.
uh, as our guest speaker was talking, decades back, F.G. Bailey, who was a social anthropologist, came and he wanted to study the social and political dynamics of Odisha. And he has also published a book, Social Change in Odisha, in 1957, 59. So that was a widely circulated book, and he has studied the electoral dynamics in Odisha with reference to Kandhamal district, now called Fulbani district. He has given the different dimensions of electoral politics, how different castes behave, how tribals have behaved, how the scheduled caste community they have behaved in different constituencies, and he interviewed 56 MLAs of the Odisha Vidhan Sabha. It was a classic work, in my opinion. And afterwards, now we have series of scholars who have studied electoral politics in India, both at the micro level and macro level. But I have got certain important observations today. Number one, whether our electorate is mature. One that Dr. Ramchandra Prasad of Magadha University, Bodh Gaya, wrote a book entitled Mature Electorate in Bihar. But now, after going through the different electoral dynamics, the voting behavior, I am of the opinion that still electorate is not mature. But we have given the right to vote, universal adult suffrage or universal adult franchise, one man, one vote, one woman, one vote. And we, the framers of the Constitution, were very clear in their mind that because of the strong common sense that an Indian has, there is absolutely no requirement or precondition of education. Because when we apply the American model or the Western model in Indian context, you will find many of the hypotheses that they build, it will prove wrong. For example, more the education, more will be the voting percentage. For example, more the urbanized, more the voting percentage. In India, just the reverse. Less the educated, they go to the polling booth, more in numbers and vote. In rural areas, the percentage of voting is 70%, 80%, whereas in urban or peri-urban areas, it is between 50 to or 45 to 65, like that. That is one. Second, the party system in India. We started with 72 political parties in 1951-52. Now the number has gone to say 2,599. Amazing, amazing figure. So in a pluralistic democracy, where there is great diversity in terms of language, caste, community, ethnicity, culture, how do you find a particular model which will be applicable? Then the third point that I would like to impress upon you is ideology. Earlier, in the first elections of 1951-52, then second, third, fourth, people were fighting in terms of ideology. I am a leftist, he is a rightist, he is a centrist, he is a socialist, he is a Lohiabadi socialist, he is a Gandhian socialist, he is a Marxist. So like that, ideologically. Now ideology is no longer the basis of fighting in itself. Ideology remains only inside the what we call election manifestos, if they claim to be ideology. Third is mobilization of voters. Now you find, if you consider 51-52 election and the 2019 election or 2021 election that we 22 election that we experienced, you will find that the percentage is rising. But even today, we are demanding that there must be compulsory voting. There must be legal method to make it compulsory. But arguments against this system is also very costly. They say it is not possible to enforce compulsory voting. Gujarat has started this proposal, but all India did not accept. Another thing that comes to our mind and is being widely debated for the last few years is one nation, one election. In my opinion, it is impossible because of the system that we have got, because of the three-type structure we have. We have election to the Lok Sabha, we have election to the state legislatures, and we have election to PRIs and urban local bodies. Now, Indian democracy has become three-tier. The parliamentary federal model has become three-tier instead of two tiers. Fourth thing that I want to make a mention about is we have seen in our analysis there was a time when socialism defined two words, and that was very applicable to electoral politics. One was the vote bank politics or vote leader. This concept was popularized by M.N. Srinivas, an outstanding socialist. And he also talked about a concept called dominant caste, that in every village, in every district, in every taluk, there is a caste which is dominant, maybe because of numerical strength or because of their uh, economic power or influence. Dominant caste can be. Then I have seen in India a particular term called wave politics. You find it is very difficult to predict an Indian voter. In America, you can predict. In England, you can predict. You cannot predict an Indian voter. He will go in somebody's rickshaw, take tiffin from somebody's hotel, vote for the third person. That is why politicians across this spectrum, they fear voters. They don't fear God. God they can purchase by paying crores, but they cannot purchase a voter. And a voter is one in India who will always give a 45-degree smile to everybody who approaches him for food. Everybody. This party comes, X party, smile. Y party, smile. So this smile, just like the smile of Mona Lisa, you cannot understand a voter. Very peculiar. And second thing is, there are two types of voters in India. One is committed voters. You may take any action against me, but I committed to give to vote to this party. I will give, whatever may be the consequence. But there are floating voters who are undecided till the last day, as our guest speaker was speaking. Till the final deadline, he is undecided. He just like water in a lotus field. That is the condition. And he is not aware of a term. I must tell my friend, our guest, that Dr. Hare Krishna Mahatab, who was a union minister, who was governor, who was prime minister of Odisha, who was also chief minister of Odisha, he gave a coinage to a word called homogostra. So the night before the election day, voting day is called, use of homogostra means by hook or by crook, by paying money, by paying different price, different items, saris, you can motivate the voters. You can change their mind. That is called omega astra. That astra is the final astra, weapon in the armory of the candidate. This is one. And regarding wave politics, I can tell you, nobody knows. For example, in 1971, nobody knew that Indira Gandhi is coming with such a thumping majority with 351 seats in the Lok Sabha. Her only slogan was Garibi Hatao. The opposition wants to ensure that I must quit the office. I want poverty elevation. removal of poverty. One slogan gave him 351. Nobody knew. 77, Indira Gandhi never visualized a situation where she will lose in Raebareli and her dear son Sanjay will lose in Amethi. One slogan by Jayaprakash Narayan Loknaik was enough. तानाशाही हटाओ, प्रजातंत्र को बचाओ. Defeat dictatorship, save democracy. Finished. Congress was finished. Indira lost. Sanjay lost. From Chilika till Kashmir, anti-Congress. From Chilika to Kanyakumari, pro-Congress. 77 election. In 1980, Indira Gandhi came with a slogan, vote for a stable government. Vote for the government that works. People again voted to Indira Gandhi. And her slogan was, ना जात पर ना देहात पर, इंदिरा गांधी के बात पर मोहर लगा तो हाथ पर. You don't go by caste, you don't go by community. Indira Gandhi is requesting you simply go and vote to Indira Gandhi on the hand symbol. That was the slogan. In 1984, Rajiv Gandhi was a political novice. She was told by his advisor to only utter 7 sentences. Don't go for 8th one. भाइयों और बहनों, मेरी माँ आपके प्रिय प्रधानमंत्री अब नहीं रही. उन्होंने देश की एकता और अखंडता के लिए अपना कुर्बानी दी. ये जो विरोधी दल है, ये सब आनंदपुर साहिब रेजुलेशन को लागू करना चाहते हैं. अगर आनंदपुर साहिब रेजुलेशन लागू हो जाएगा तो देश खंड विखंडित हो जाएगा. इसलिए आपको कांग्रेस को वोट दे. जय हिंद. From Kashmir to Kanyakumari, from Gandhinagar to Guwahati, same 7 sentences. My mother has given her life. You give the vote to unity and integrity. What was the response? People of India responded. They gave 402 seats, and after the election that were countermanded were held, her tally was 416 record. That is the only election where a single party got more than 50% of election, including the countermanded elections. Till now, you will not find another election where a party gets majority seats and majority of votes, 50% plus 1. We say this system, fast past the post system, is another very important aspect of electoral democracy. Another point I will give you. Later on, one issue now DP Singh came, resigned from the Congress, formed the Jana Morcha and gave only slogan on corruption. And people in North India, they became mad. They say, ये राजा नहीं फकीर है, देश की तकदीर है, राजा तुम संघर्ष करो, हम तुम्हारे साथ है. So the man who was finance minister Rajiv Gandhi resigned, suddenly defeated Congress and along with other parties formed the government. So like that you find different slogans. I'm not dilating that. Then campaign process. Now campaign has become very vibrant. Social media, print and electronic research. Then, now there has been a particular aspect which has been emphasized from 1951, 51, 52 till today. What is that? Now it is being talked about in the term double engine sarkar. The party that is power in the center must vote in the state so that there will be double engine. This theory was maintained by the Congress leadership. We had Binayak Acharya, who became Chief Minister of Odisha for 123 days. He was always in his speeches will give emphasis. If there is a party in power in the center, you also give. So that is because of lack of time, I will tell you that in different elections we fought on secularism versus communalism, on the question of social justice, on the question of Garibi Hatao, on the question of good governance, on the question of corruption-free administration. But still we find in India, caste is a factor, religion is a factor, money is a factor, personality is the greatest factor At times there is an impression being created that we are not electing MP, we are electing the Prime Minister of India. We are not electing MLA, we are electing the Chief Minister of the state. So that is also personality oriented politics. Particularly Odisha, from where I come, I find for decades personality in Odisha politics was personal personality oriented. Even today, Naveen Babu's personality is a plus point. That is why he became Chief Minister of the state for 5 consecutive terms, a record in Odisha politics. So, what we should do? How to strengthen democracy? So long as people are not conscious about the value of the vote, so long as they do not want to safeguard democracy because they get the chance, opportunity, which has been given constitutionally to him, the right to vote, if they don't exercise it properly, our democracy will not be strengthened. I am an optimist because if you consider democracy Southeast Asia, but democracy has failed in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. India has stood the test of time. India has survived the democracy. We may have aberrations, we may have challenges, we may have impediments, but we are continuing with the democracy, except that we had an emergency in 75 June. After, except that, we have got democracy continuing. So, as an optimist, I will say we will strengthen democracy provided each Indian will think in terms of the future of the country and the future of democracy in India. Thank you very much.
So thank you, Vishnu sir. Your insights are very valuable. No doubt there are challenges, but still then, comparatively speaking, Indian democracy it is deepening, and comparatively, it is a better thing. The tradition of discussion, deliberation, that is there with Indian tradition civilization. If Professor Lobo wants to give his response on the comments by Professor Chaudhary, he may give. Then I will go back to uh, Subhasri for vote of thanks. No, sir, you have to unmute. You have to unmute. Subhasri, right now I have not
Yes.
asked you.
Good evening to
Yes, Lobo sir.
Thank you, Professor Bishnu Chaudhary. It was a pleasure listening to you. You have traced the historical evolution of the relevance of the voter and his value. Thank you for saying that.
So thank you, Lobo sir. Now we are at the last part of this event. Now I request Subhasri. She is a student, PG student of Sundargarh Government College, and I find her very good student. Now she will provide the vote of thanks. You have to unmute Subhasri. You then.
good evening to one and all. Myself Subhasri Barik, student of Government College Sudargarh in PG first semester. We take this golden opportunity to thank the respected speaker or anthropologist of this webinar, Professor Lancy Lobo, for attending this webinar in his busy schedules. He given their thought in this academic talk, ideas sharing about democracy, electoral and substantive. He gave some points like, is India follow electoral or substantive democracy? And their method was used, that is the question answer method lecture, that is false, that creates a active towards his topic. I extended my gratitude to the program coordinator of this academic talk, Dr. Himanshu Sekhar Mishra. He not only is spending his time with us today, but also for encouraging us to achieve many endeavors, says and that talk. Thank you, sir. Thirdly, I gave him a thank for Professors Vishnu Chaudhary for their comparative thought. It is my pleasure to thank the dignitaries and of the stage not only for participating but also for guiding us to a beautiful life. Thank you, sir. Last but not least, I thank my fellow students for this event. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Subhasri. So, Labo sir, this is the end of this event. So, once again, thank you on behalf of all, and thank you, Vishnu sir. Your presence and your involvement is always a asset to academics, and it's true that democracy can be, I mean, uh, understood by political scientists, by social anthropologists, by economists, right? And democracy, I mean, it is something that is for all, and all are contributing to the democracy. So Vishnu sir perspective was very much political, and Lobo sir perspective was very much, you know, academic in nature, very much research based, right? So this is the experience. This, I mean, our student must understand that the questions that is very important of this talk was there. The point, the question that has been raised by Professor Lobo, and all these questions are actually, these are one PhD thesis. You work, you got a thesis, and Lobo sir is always there. If you want any methodological help, Lobo sir can be contacted, communicated, and these people are there only for academics, for us who are committed to the academics. So thank you, Lobo sir. Thank you, Vishnu sir. We have to end. Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you.